when you're connecting with the veteran community, they're not people that you can just, make a statement or have an offer that you're giving a veteran discount, which is great, but action speaks so much louder than words. They're someone who you have to continuously show up for. And that starts with educating yourself as a funeral director. What are the benefits for the veteran community at my city, at my county, and at my state?
Welcome to FD Talks, the forward-thinking podcast created to help funeral professionals run their business and serve families. Join us as we discover important funeral and death care topics. Gain incredible, dependable, and valuable information to help your business succeed in a rapidly changing environment. Hello, and welcome to another episode of FD Talks. Today we have a very special guest talking about a pretty important topic. Our local veterans have done so much for us and deserve the benefits available to them. But unfortunately, according to the Department of Veterans Affairs, only 29% of veterans understand their burial benefits. But your funeral home can change that. Madison Miller, who grew up in the funeral profession and was crowned Miss Ohio in 2023, is passionate about serving her local veterans and bridging the gap between veterans and their communities. Madison joins the podcast today to share how her background with veterans has shaped her life and what funeral homes can do specifically to reach and educate their local veterans.
My name is Madison Miller. I'm from a small town in the east central side of Ohio, and although I'm a communications and marketing specialist by day, at the end of it all, I'm a funeral director's daughter. I've grown up my entire life in and around the death care industry, and my family opened our funeral home and crematory in 2011 in our small town. On top of all the things that come with this crazy life, I also advocate with and for military veterans, and this especially was true during my time as Miss Ohio. I was crowned June of 2023 and just concluded my year here a few months ago back in June of 2024, so I was able to represent Ohio on the Miss America stage, talk a lot about my life as a funeral director's kid, but most importantly advocate for military veterans on a national level. So a lot's been going on, but as I'm settling down in this post-Miss Ohio life, my advocacy and work with veterans is starting to really take the forefront and the light of my time.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about how that passion started for you?
It actually started in the funeral home. When I was little, I would sit and watch my dad either conclude a service or conduct a service specifically for our veterans. I'd watch the Honor Guard march in to the Battle Hymn of the Republic and march back out, and I'd always ask my dad questions or I'd say hello to them, but my grandpas both served during Vietnam. So one was in country and one stayed stateside, and they always taught me how to say thank you to our veterans. And I practiced with our Honor Guard. I didn't really understand until I got older the why behind it. I would ask veterans, how can I help? It's my favorite way to get involved in something, Not every volunteer opportunity is going to be in the forefront helping with people directly. It could be on the back end. And I understood that there was a mental health crisis on the veteran community. We lose 22 veterans a day. And to me, I think about my grandpas. I think about my Honor Guard that I've grown up around. I think about my friends who are serving. And to that, for me, became a priority and really a guiding light for my continued service with them. But it all started in our funeral home parlor.
What is it that you found out that kind of made you see that maybe that population was being underserved?
The mental health and the stigma around those types of conversations is already pretty alarming. I'm somebody who has generalized anxiety disorder, and it wasn't something I really discovered until I was an adult. It's not something that was really talked about when I was growing up as a kid. But when I started to get involved more with advocacy in the veteran community in this space, I learned a lot about myself, but I saw that the stigma over the generalized community was even stronger and almost harsher in the veteran side as well. We expect our veterans to complete their service, come back, all of our military members, and then immediately reintegrate back into society. I was interviewing a younger veteran who had served during the war on terrorism, and he said, he went in right after high school, and he came home and he's like, I was taught, how to make a resume, but I didn't know how to do my laundry. I didn't really know how to cook. That's all been done for me, whether it was by my parents living under their roof or by the military when I was serving in Afghanistan. I didn't have to think about these things. So basic things, and I say that with quotes, to civilians is going to be really difficult for somebody to connect with, to learn, to have to figure out while they're also finding a job, finding housing, reestablishing relationships. So we have all of these exterior factors coming in, and I saw that if we can combat this by talking about it, by showing resources, by working with our cities, communities, counties and states on the legislative level even to build up these conversations and actually implement policies, we can not only create accessible resources, but equitable resources to meet every veteran where they're at and get them exactly what they need.
And I'm assuming that's kind of what helped you maybe establish your nonprofit organization?
Yeah, I was in a coffee shop and I was actually having these same conversations with a few veterans of mine. And one of them I asked, how can I help? And he took me to his local American Legion. And from there, he had these types of conversations, who are you? What are you doing? And I asked, how can I help? And after we had a little bit of a deeper level of a conversation, he led me to a coffee shop and brought one of the veterans he was mentoring. So these veterans served during and in Vietnam, so they were in country. And I started to talk to them. So one's name was Dick and the other's was Larry. And Larry doesn't talk about Vietnam, or he hadn't at least at the time. So I didn't want to touch the topic. But when we started our how are yous and what have you been up to, and I was telling about my time in college and my work in Miss Ohio or trying to become Miss Ohio at some point, we naturally navigated into his military testimony. And Larry had told me that when he was in Vietnam, sending money home to take care of his family, sending clothes home for him to come back to, that they would disappear when he had gotten home. And not just the resources, but his family. They were burning his clothes, burning his letters, took the money, and disappeared. And this is someone who didn't choose to go in. He was drafted. This wasn't his choice to pick up and leave. But that's what he came back to. And at the end of our conversation, it was actually about 3 hours. What we expected to be a 30-minute little coffee chat turned into a few cups of coffee, and some coffee that sat on the table ended up cold by the end of it. And he shook my hand and said, never would I thought in a million years that a young person would care what I had to say. And it altered the course of my life. I ended up founding the Veteran Narrative, and we try to cultivate an empowering environment for veterans to share their testimonies so we can share them with the world. So we do podcasts like this, providing spaces for them to talk about it. We provide chances for veterans to get into schools. We read kids' stories and give them opportunities to give back. We ultimately like to think of ourselves as the bridge between the gap of veterans and the community. And it's been amazing work and an amazing time.
Are there some other organizations that you have found helpful?
So many. If you Google any sort of veteran organizations near me, you can find anything. I always try to find opportunities to help specifically by meeting veterans where they're at. So I'm thinking your American Legions, your VFWs, your Vietnam Veterans of America. To most, this might look like a restaurant or a canteen, but really it's a place for community for veterans. They're constantly giving back to their communities. They're giving back to children. So every community has these across the country. So those are always great organizations that are constantly finding chances to give back. But one that I actively participate in that's nationwide, so all of you guys might know it as well, is the Honor Flight Network. And these provide free chances for veterans to fly to DC to see the monuments that they fought for, to see the monuments of the wars that came before them and after them, seeing their friends memorialized on the Vietnam Wall. It creates the day that they deserve. And not only that, they get welcomed home by thousands of people, at least in Columbus. So for my Vietnam guys who never got that welcome home over 50 years ago, they fly to DC for the day in the morning and they fly back the same day, and they're greeted by thousands of people in Columbus, Ohio. So although we have a few hubs in Ohio, they're all over the country sending our veterans to go have the day that is long overdue.
That's incredible.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Can you maybe share a success story or what that, so that we can kind of see what that might look like, somebody going through that process?
So I've had the chance to go as a guardian twice now, and a guardian is somebody who accompanies these veterans along. And it is the most life-changing thing I've ever experienced. And most recently, I actually got to go with my dad. So my dad is the funeral director in our family, and I felt so strongly that after seeing his advocacy with and for veterans as well, it's his dad that was a Navy Seabee in Vietnam, that this is the 10-year anniversary, actually, it's coming up here for us, of my grandpa's passing. So we wanted to take a trip together along with my aunt to memorialize my grandpa on the trip that he was never able to get. So we had taken our veterans, and my one veteran, Dean, he had served, and then once he got out of the service was a firefighter. And he felt like he didn't deserve any thanks. He was happy to do his service. Once he got out, like I said, he continued in a different way by saving and protecting his community through educating people about fire prevention, fighting fires, and then he retired, not really, and went to inspect fire trucks. And on his day in D.C., we were welcomed in D.C. with a fire salute. So they brought the fire trucks from the airport in and did a water salute over the plane. So he got to start his day by seeing his communities come together, a group of firefighters honoring their plane, honoring the veterans on the plane with one of the most special actions that could happen is that water salute. And while he was there, kids kept lining up, thanking him for his service because we all had matching polos. He wore his veteran's hat. And he was in tears in front of the Vietnam Wall when a line of 80 junior high kids had lined up to shake his hand to thank him for his service. I had another opportunity a year prior to go again, and one of my combat veterans, he was at the wall and he was looking for his buddy's name. And he went to go get his buddy's name off the wall, and I'm watching him have a conversation with the ranger, and he takes the same piece of paper down to do a rubbing of the second name. And the ranger went to hand him a card. He said, hey, I got plenty of these. We can give you separate ones. And he said, I couldn't take them out of the field together, and I'm going to take them out together today. And I stepped away seeing that they were having a deeper conversation. And when I got home and we were debriefing, and my veteran had turned to me and said that he found closure at the wall that he has never had before. And he's somebody who has gone multiple times to D.C. But that trip, that conversation is one that gave him a little bit of closure from Vietnam that he hasn't had for however many years now. So there's countless stories of life change that happens, but I know my life has changed for the better getting to know these veterans on the trip, but also after the trip as well.
That's an incredible story. Let me ask you something from back to the funeral home perspective. We spend a lot of time, my team spends a lot of time in funeral homes, and one of the conversations that seems to come up quite a bit are veteran benefits. So many veterans don't really understand what their benefits are until it's time when they're at the funeral home. Sometimes it's their spouse, and they've passed and their spouse doesn't know. How important do you think it is for a funeral home to maintain that relationship with veterans in their community?
I think it's absolutely integral. I not only believe truly that it's a great business decision, but I think it's great self-development as well. One of the largest things that I preach to funeral directors is that you're a person first, and you have to make sure that you're taking care of your well-being and you are keeping up on your community as a person first, because that's how people are always going to see you. If you are educating yourself out in the community to see what their needs are directly, it'll make you a better funeral director in turn. And ultimately, if you're a funeral home owner, you're going to be able to run a better business because of it. So when you're connecting with the veteran community, they're not people that you can just make a statement or have an offer that you're giving a veteran discount, which is great, but action speaks so much louder than words. Granted, I'm not somebody who's been in the military. I'm not a veteran myself, so I can't ever fully say what I believe the veteran community wants or believes. However, through my work with them and experiencing all of these opportunities with them, I truly know that they are someone who you have to continuously show up for. And that starts with educating yourself as a funeral director. What are the benefits for the veteran community at my city, at my county, and at my state? Because it's going to vary. I wish I could give a cheat sheet or a fact sheet to help people, but start a conversation with your local VA. If a funeral director's job, in my eyes, is to make the planning process and ultimately make those hard decisions easier in the end to have this opportunity for closure, then we have to be an informational resource for all of those components. So starting conversations with VAs. But if you have the support of your veterans, you're also going to be able to serve veterans better. Honor guards are a huge part of providing the last and most honorable honors to a fallen brother or sisters in arms. And if you have a great relationship with your honor guard, you're not only going to be able to create a unique experience, but you're going to make sure that you're giving the best experience to the family, to the veteran who's passed, and to the brothers and sisters who have been with them that entire time in the community. I could go on and on about how important it is to stay connected, but being connected is not just a great business decision, but you will change and become a better person because of it, and ultimately you're going to be strengthening your community through it.
It's also important to note that you're coming from a place of experience too, because there are some things that you did with Miller Funeral Home in doing that and helped sort of create some of these procedure things for you. Were there some other things that maybe we could give out as advice for other funeral homes that they can start doing?
Yeah, and I also want to give the disclaimer that I'm not a licensed funeral director. I'm not quite sure that I'll go into the funeral business, but I did have a conversation with my dad leading up to this to prepare to even share some of the things that he thinks about on the side, because I really believe that our funeral home does a phenomenal job at serving this community. One prime example is we had a soldier who was killed in action over in Europe back in like World War II. So the remaining family was all out of state, but because of the reviews that we had on how we take care of our veterans at our funeral home, the family from out of state that had no concept of our hometown except for the fact that this long lost relative had lived here had chosen us to take care of them. So my dad had done research. He looked into the service of that particular veteran. He looked into the conflict that he passed in. He coordinated the police department, the fire department, the community, and we lined the streets when we were bringing Sergeant Appleby home, someone who had passed all of those years ago, to give them the honors that they deserve, to give them a full parlor during their funeral, to give this family out of state some sort of connection to this relative that they never met. And that even goes back to your earlier question of why it's so important to serve the veteran community, is because of the way that people spoke of us and how we cared for them ended up coming back when we had somebody who had no connection to us other than that they had been in our community long before we had. But something my dad has always said is that people aren't going to remember what you say, but they're always going to remember how you've made them feel. And that's something I carry in life, but it's so important in the funeral home business because you all have one chance to get this right. Like, you can't mess up at a funeral and ask the family for a do-over. So when you are doing these, all of this prep and work happens outside of the arrangement room. It happens outside of the funeral home. So we provide a Veterans Appreciation Dinner for our honor guard, and it's something I've valued ever since I was a kid. I've been going to these, and I'm 24 now, but our first one was when I was 11. And we cater in food for them. We have a presentation for them. We honor any veteran that's served in a large number of funerals. We have a few who've hit 1,000 funerals that they've served. They're in snow, sleet, hail, rain, the freezing cold, right alongside our funeral directors at burials to make sure that they give the honors that the fallen had deserved. So we love and pride ourselves in that, and that's a great chance for the veterans and their spouses to connect with us as people. When we had first started, I had taken liberty to raid my dad's supply closet, and I grabbed the most American-looking paper that I could out of all the memorial folders, stationery, all of the things. So I found a piece of paper with an American flag border. I grabbed all of the Sharpies, highlighters, anything I could find on his desk, and I put, "Thanks for serving, love the Millers." And I customized it for every single veteran that attended from our honor guard at this appreciation dinner. And placemats typically get thrown away, but about 10 years later, one of our honor guard members came and showed up to our funeral home, and he had a manila folder in his hand. So he asked to meet with my dad, and of course my dad obliged. We love our honor guard, if you couldn't tell. And he slid this manila folder across my dad's desk. And he said, "Matt, I want to make sure that this gets into my pre-need. It's my most favorite gift." And my dad opens it to the laminated placemat I made when I was 11. And something as small as Sharpie, highlighter, and a piece of paper at our funeral home's appreciation dinner not only impacted Elmer as a veteran, but impacted him as a person. And it goes so far to show that people are not always going to remember what you say, but they will always remember exactly how you've made them feel. And we always try to make those opportunities, and something I'm very proud of to say when I come from a funeral home family is that we leave people feeling loved, heard, valued, not only in the time of their passing and in time of their need, but throughout the entirety of their life too. And something else I didn't know my dad did until I called him before this is that if he knows that the honor guard's been really busy, I mean, think about it. If a funeral home's been busy, the honor guard's probably been busier if you have multiple funeral homes in your county. He sends them to lunch. He sends them to the local American Legion. He pays for their lunch. And throughout the year, he gives them breaks, knowing that a lot of them, at least in my community, are Vietnam-era veterans. They're typically at least 70 years old. So he's treating them out, letting them sit, relax together, have a meal together, and ultimately be able to better connect to us, connect to the community, and feel like they're appreciated. And that's the bottom line of why we do what we do.
Can you just share with me what you think funeral homes are risking by not fostering these relationships with the veteran community?
I think ultimately you're building yourself a wall and isolating yourself from the community. When I look at the veteran community and its an entirety, these are people who are constantly finding opportunities to give back. And I'm not even talking about the time that they've sacrificed from their own life and away from their own family to serve in whatever capacity that they had in the military, whether it's stateside or abroad. But when we aren't recognizing and working with them and ultimately not learning from them, we are not going to be able to run a good business that's built on serving the community. And actions, like I said, speak louder than words. If you're not meeting the needs of your community, you're ultimately not running a good business. And the needs of our community today, in such a divisive time in this world, we all can at least unite on one thing, and that's the military and veteran community. So by meeting your needs of your community, by asking your veteran community, how can we help? You'd be surprised. It's not just through writing a check or sponsorships. It's hosting these dinners. It's finding chances to give back alongside them in their communities. It could be meeting a veteran out for coffee. There's so many ways to learn from them, not just as a funeral director, not as a business owner, but as a person, that are going to make you a better funeral director in the end.
Well, special thanks to Madison for sharing all of her thoughts on what funeral professionals can do to connect with veterans in their communities. And we're especially thankful for all of her stories and memories that she shared with us today. I hope that this episode has given you a lot to think about and maybe made you wonder if you're doing all you can to reach and educate your local veterans. And remember, connecting with your veterans doesn't have to be hard. Like Madison said, it all starts by asking, how can I help? Madison will be back on the podcast in the near future for another episode, so be sure to check back with us to hear more about her time growing up in the funeral profession and what she believes every funeral professional can do to better care for families and for themselves. Thanks once again for watching, and we'll see you again soon. If you would like more information about today's topic or previous discussions, please visit us online at funeraldirectorslife.com/FD Talks. There you can find information about this podcast and submit any comments, suggestions, or feedback about our series. We also welcome your ideas for future episodes. Listen to FD Talks wherever you get your podcasts.